Another vampire. The beginning of the vampire road in history was at the hands of Fritz Harman, and it was in the beginning easy to kill victims or even the number of victims. It wasn't taken into account that Harman would be a role model for another serial killer more terrifying than him and surpasses him in the number of victims. As the number of victims reached 100 people and they were all young, the killer didn't only kill them, but he was eating meat and sending parents a message of thanks for the taste of their son's meat and that it was a wonderful food for him. And no one knew who he was, and it was in the message real. And why was he doing that? Albert Fish was born in 1870 on 19 May in a family with a history of mental illness where his uncle was obsessed with religion and his brother who lived in this mental hospital isn't most of the family that suffered from mental, auditory, and visual hallucinations. Because of the family history, the mother and father decided to send him to the orphanage in order to live a stable life. Albert lived his worst days in the orphanage where he was tortured and beaten and didn't benefit anything from the orphanage and began to teach himself to read and write. In 1880, the mother decided to take him out of the orphanage and take him, but it was late as Albert began to do disgusting and strange things that have no explanation, and he decided to marry in 1898 and had 6 children with his wife, and was then working in the oyster. Because of Albert's actions with his wife and her mistreatment, she decided to run away from him and he became in a state of extreme anger and was moody, which made him start torturing and beating. His children even decided to leave him and run away like their mother until he became alone after them. And Albert began to write what he was doing in his family and describe things in detail and not neglect something he did with his wife or children. Albert was choosing the victims carefully so as not to fall into the hands of the police, where the victims weren't known and are still unknown to this day. And this is because most of them were Africans and the American police at the time didn't care about them. So Albert didn't fall into their hands as he carefully selected the victims and took them away from home and tortured them in different ways. He used nails and knives and sharp iron tools, and then he assaulted them, then killed them and ate their meat. And after finishing eating, he sends a message to the parents thanking them for the quality of their son's meat and that it was a delicious lunch. Albert was in this situation for years, and no one knows who he is or stands up to him until his last crime. Grace Bat is a 10-year-old girl whose parents knew Albert. He was a family friend for years, and one day Albert decided that Grace would be his next victim. He went to her family home and told them that there was his niece's birthday, Tina, and decided to take Grace with him so that she could play with the kids and spend time having fun. The family agreed to the proposal and didn't know Albert's intentions. On Christmas Day, he went to take the girl and started walking with her in the street. Then he bought her ice cream so that she wouldn't doubt it, and he took it, saying that there was a shortcut street, and the girl went with him in innocence and didn't suspect anything until she found that the street was dark and had many dense trees and no one walked in it. And she asked him, saying, "Are we going to cross? From here, Uncle is Tania's house, here like Cinderella?" The girl finished the question Albert muffled her mouth and then isolated her and strangled her until she died in his hands. It didn't end here for him, as he took her home with him and he started the second part of the plan, where he started to bring his tools, and he started the most important part of the work, which was to separate the head of the body. Then he opened the abdomen, extracted the viscera, and threw them in a rotten black garbage bag in the far corner of the room. Then he started tearing the body apart, separating the flesh from the bones, and healing the girl's flesh completely. Albert was doing all those horrible things without batting an eyelid. How much he did it before, and every time he finished it was easy. He finished skinning and vacuuming the meat. He collected the remaining bones and stacked them in one of the corners while he managed to get rid of them. And in an enviable calmness, Albert got up without thinking for a moment to clean the earth of all that blood and human waste on it, to prepare for himself lunch, and it was a busy lunch that day, where he chose a piece of the girl's meat and began to cook it with some vegetables and then ate it, and after he finished eating it, he felt that he should thank the family for the beauty and splendor of the taste of their daughter's meat, and indeed began to write them a letter thanking them and then signed his name in the end. He saw that he could eat and he is comfortable and reassured of the girl's meat without feeling guilty. It didn't take time until the police knew that the one who killed the girl was Albert and began investigations with him, and during the investigation the police knew that the disappearance of the boys in the recent period was because of Albert, and that he killed them all and ate their meat without feeling guilty, and the number of victims reached 100 people, and that every time he killed a boy or girl, a message to the child's parents that his meat was a wonderful food for him and they aren't looking for it, he thought, so that he was making the parents reassured, and that he wrote his name in the last letter because he felt guilty toward the family, but ended when he sent them the letter. The police initially thought that this man is deranged and impossible to be of sound mind, as he was happy and smiling as he described the crimes and torture that the children were subjected to. And I already confirmed this when I found the letters written with his hands about the torture of his children and his strange style with his wife. The court was on 11 March 1935, and psychiatrists confirmed that Albert suffers from insanity, and the court sentenced him to death by electric chair, and indeed the sentence was exhausted on 16 January 1936.